All right, good afternoon. This is Tommy Valentine with Historic Athens. We want to thank you for joining us today for our 1 o'clock episode of This Moment in History, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. Today is episode 37 of 55. If after watching today's episode, you're interested in going back to our archive to see our other 36 episodes with community leaders, elected officials, business owners, and the like, you can go to the videos section of our Facebook page to find out more. Also, a little later in today's broadcast, we're going to tell you about Historic Athens and how you can get plugged in if you're someone who loves Athens, Georgia, and loves history. And we'll also make sure to emphasize to you the episodes we have ahead of us and the remaining episodes between now and Friday, June 26th. With that said, I want to add one last note before we bring on our guest today. It is a note about how you can participate in this process. At the conclusion of all 55 episodes, we plan on packaging this as a digital archive and providing it to local libraries and research institutions. You can be part of that historic record by commenting and participating in today's video. So this isn't just a static video that you can watch. You can actually comment as long as we're still live. Just comment below this video. We can share it on the screen. It can guide our dialogue. Let us know what you and the community are interested in. This week's series has been brought to you by this week's weekly sponsor, which is Karen and Norman Baldwin. So we want to thank the Baldwins so much for supporting this effort to document and explore this moment in Athens history. Thank you so much. Okay, today's guest is Blake Aued. He's no stranger to many of you. He has been a pivotal voice in local journalism in Athens, not just for many years, but throughout multiple publications and multiple roles. More often than not, if any time in more than the last decade you were reading about local news and politics, there's a very good chance you were reading something that was put together by Blake. We're very fortunate to have him here today. This is a time where we're, of course, very interested in journalism and how it's capturing the world around us. And that's something that Blake's put a lot of thought into. So if you have any questions in particular about anything, please let us know. I just see I just saw a note from our guest. So we're going to wait one moment just before we bring him into the screen here. While we have you, though, great. 1 second here. Blake, I see you're commenting. I don't actually see your video, Blake. So let's try this one more time. Let's see here. And I see a note in the public. Great. Okay. So we are here. And permit us 1 second. We're just going to take 1 second to get Blake on the line. So Blake, if you're there, I see that you're typing in host chat, but if you could disconnect and just reconnect to the chat, I should be able to add your video in. For some reason, your video feed is not available to me. So while we're waiting to get Blake into this feed, I do want to just quickly say that we appreciate everyone who's tuning in. I see we have more than a dozen folks already here today. Stay with us. What we'll do so that we can have an uninterrupted conversation with Blake is I'm just going to very quickly thank our sponsors very briefly. So I see that we have folks with us. Don't leave. I'm just going to very quickly thank our sponsors, and that'll give Blake time to log in so that we can start this conversation in earnest. So very briefly, as I said, I wanted to show you. So you've tuned in today to our interview with Blake Aued. You can see we have a number of conversations coming up. Tomorrow, we're speaking to Jessica Rothacker of Heirloom, followed by Chris Herron of Creature Comforts, then Commissioner Jerry Neesmith. And so we should have some interesting conversations this week. We hope that you'll continue to tune in. And I think you can see several of the guests we have coming up. Blake, I see we have Blake back as an option to bring in. Blake, stick with us. I'm just very briefly thanking our sponsors now. So when we start our conversation, we can do so in an uninterrupted way. These are our annual sponsors. Thank you so much to everyone here who makes our work possible with Historic Athens. If you'd like to become a sponsor or a member, you can do so at historicathens.com. Every donor and member counts. When this episode ends at 2 o'clock, we encourage you to head over to the Athens Welcome Center Facebook page so that you can experience their live casts that start each day at 2 o'clock. And then last but not least, I just wanted to share that one fun and easy way for you to support the work we're doing in our community is we've partnered with Satisfactory Printing to start a line of limited edition historic t-shirts. The first three you see here are Buildings of Athens, Rock Springs Historic Districts, and Boulevard Historic District. We hope to do more historic areas And we can do so if you purchase these shirts, which you can do so at historicathens.com. So with that said, with our gratitude sent out to all of our guests and hosts and donors and sponsors, if you want to find out more, you can do so at historicathens.com. We'll now bring our guest onto the program. So let's see here. All right, Blake, hello. How are you?
Great. How are you, Tommy?
Good. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. So, Blake, as I mentioned, I think you're a familiar figure to a lot of folks, especially the type of folks that would be likely to tune into something like this. But I imagine we're going to have a few viewers that aren't familiar with you, at least by name, whether they're tuning in now or tuning in future generations coming back to this interview. Could you take a few minutes to outline who you are and what your relationship is with Athens, Georgia?
Sure. I'm the news editor at Flagpole Magazine, which is the alternative weekly paper here in Athens. And I moved here in 2005 after I graduated from college at the University of Mississippi. I took a job at the Banner Herald, the Daily. I was a politics and government reporter there for about 7 years. And then left and went to work at my current job at Flagpole.
Great. You can tell you're a journalist because you're able to get a long narrative condensed into a short period of time.
Yeah, I can go into more detail if you want.
Yeah. Do a little bit of a deeper dive for sure.
It's not a very interesting story, so that's the gist of it.
Yeah. What attracted you to journalism in the first place?
Well, I've always enjoyed writing. I was a English and journalism major in college, and so journalism was a way to make a little bit of money, not very much, but a little bit of money writing. And I've always been interested in politics, and I saw it as sort of an avenue where I could use my skills to try to make the world a better place, I guess. I know that sounds a little bit idealistic. People who know me are probably going to be surprised, but Tommy, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, the Newtown train was going by. I was trying to save the audience from that. So yeah, Blake, I said that I don't think it's that surprising that you felt this need to improve your world and your community because I mentioned earlier you switched publications at one point. It's not uncommon to have a journalist when they switch publications to switch cities, but you maintained a local focus here in Athens, Georgia. Where does that affection for Athens, Georgia, or that compulsion for Athens, Georgia come from? Why are you so tied in here?
It's just a great city. It's a great place to live. When I moved here, I didn't really expect to stay very long. I figured it would be seemed like a good job and a fun place to spend 2 or 3 years of my 20s. And then, like a lot of people, just kind of got hooked and didn't want to leave.
Yeah. The one thing that I know about you that is distinct from some other journalists I've come across is it seems to be really important to you close to professional journalistic ethics and integrity. I know that when we've talked in the past, and I know this has been kind of a joke between us, but if I say off the record with you, I feel comfortable that means something. Whereas I think some folks that have found their way in through journalism through maybe less professional avenues aren't fully familiar with kind of journalistic integrity or what those ethics are like. If somebody's tuning in who doesn't really understand journalism and how it might be different from blogging or sharing things on social media, can you indulge us for a second and just kind of outline what journalism means to you and how it's distinct?
Well, it's more of a rigorous process, I guess, than somebody. People on social media, they can kind of say whatever they want, and you never really know whether something is true or whether it's not. And there's some friction there, I think, because a lot of times the things you see on social media, you may not you can't really be confident that they're true, but sometimes they are. And so as journalists, we're challenged sometimes to try to even keep up with social media. I mean, a lot of news actually breaks on social media,
Right.
and because journalists have an obligation to work to confirm things, we oftentimes find ourselves falling behind because we can't just throw anything up there that we might hear.
Right.
We've got to go through a process of trying to confirm it and make sure that it's true. But the flip side to that is you can have more confidence in the information that we bring you, even though you might be seeing something all over Facebook. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but we're going to be looking into it, and we're going to be able to tell you what's actually going on.
I see a question here from Michelle Wynn. I'm going to share this with you. And I know that Athens particularly might have some unique answers to this. But Michelle shared, how do we get our kids to get back into publishing and journalism? I grew up making zines with friends, and we had a newsroom in our middle school. Does that still happen? I know that, we have Blueprints and Odyssey locally. What's your feelings on Michelle's question and the interaction between young people and journalism these days?
I think kids still are interested in journalism, and journalism is going to. I mean, it's changed so much in the past 15 to 20 years, and it's going to continue to change. And some of that's for the good, and some of it's for the bad. But I definitely think kids are still interested in journalism. I think the red and black, they're a little bit hit or miss. It depends on who's in charge in a particular year, but I think they've been doing a great job lately. The Odyssey kids do a great job. They did some really good work with covering the school district, especially I remember during the Lanude administration, and then more recently, the kids at Blueprints did a really great job with the investigating Antoine Stevens on the school board, and came up with some great scoops. So, I mean, I think the future is bright. I think kids are really interested in journalism. I'm not worried about future journalists so much as I'm worried about the financial side of the industry.
Yeah, can you go into that some? I almost went there with you when you brought up that Flagpole is the alternative weekly. There have been moments in recent Athens history where it looked briefly as if you would have to drop that alternative. I mean, you can't be the alternative weekly if you're the only regular publication.
Yeah.
Flagpole has been increasingly important over recent years. But the financial situation, like yesterday, I had Joshua Jones on from the Athens Banner Herald. And at the conclusion of the interview, I really urged people to subscribe to their local paper. That's something I hadn't done for a long time, but it seems like they've got a good crew there working locally. And so I subscribed yesterday for the first time in years. With Flagpole, there's can you talk a little bit about how folks locally can support the financial end of Flagpole?
Sure. Yeah. As you mentioned, this is something I actually talk about a lot, kind of internally around the office, but we're one of the few alternative papers that actually has a bigger circulation than the daily paper. We're actually at this point about twice as big. Well, probably not anymore because we've had to cut back our print run because of the pandemic. A lot of our distribution points are closed. But, pre-pandemic, we were about twice as big, of course, on a weekly basis, not a daily basis.
Right.
But, and we are entirely advertiser supported. Not quite entirely anymore, but historically, the business model of the alternative weekly is that you give away the paper for free, and that means that your circulation numbers will be higher than if you charge for it. And you don't have the infrastructure of home delivery, which costs money. And so then you're able to turn around and sell those numbers to advertisers. And that model has gotten broken, mainly because of the internet. Almost all of the new digital dollars are going to advertising dollars are going to Facebook and Google instead of going to their local publications. So that's for both dailies and weeklies. That's really eaten into the revenue. And so there have been a lot of cutbacks. And one of the reasons I left the Banner Herald was just because I'd been through like 3 rounds of layoffs.
Right.
And, the paper was turning into something that I didn't really want to be a part of, and I was worried about whether I was going to be next. And there's only about a third or maybe even a quarter of the people in the newsroom at the Banner Herald than there were when I started there.
Right.
The few people are there are doing great work. I really admire Josh. Actually used to work for Flagpole when he was in college,
Mm-hmm.
and did a terrific job for us. And he's doing a terrific job for the Banner Herald. And Wayne Ford and Lee Shearer are fantastic
Absolutely.
journalists. But the numbers are just not there, especially when you're a paper that aspires to cover a multiple county area. They're covering Oconee County, and all the counties around us are trying to. And I have a hard time asking people to support the Banner Herald just because of their corporate ownership.
Right.
They're owned by, well, it's called Gannett now because they merged with Gannett, but it was originally a company called Gatehouse Media that bought it from the Morris family, who were not great owners themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But Gatehouse is basically a hedge fund. And so I am not, and this is happening a lot. There's a lot of this going on where hedge funds are buying them newspapers and they're just sucking what last little bit of advertising funding they can get out of them, and not investing in the product. And so I'm just worried that any money that people contribute to the Banner Herald, they want to support local journalism, but it's not going to go to local journalism. It's going to go to, some investor's dividend or something like that. And Flagpole, we have started soliciting donations from our readers. So that is a way that you can support Flagpole. And Flagpole is a locally owned paper. Alicia Nichols and Beatman Commons own it. And they are not pocketing this money, I can tell you that. Anything that people give is going to be invested into the product, into the journalism.
So, Blake, there's two things you touched on that I feel like we should go into. I do want to just briefly flash on the screen, and viewers can find it in the comment section. But this is the link to the Flagpole's donation section of their website. If you go to the main part of Flagpole, you'll see there's a link that says support Flagpole. That'll also bring you there. And it goes over some of the information that Blake was just sharing about how you can support Flagpole. So we encourage our viewers here to visit that link. I know I will after this episode's over, and make sure to share some financial support that will go directly into local business owners' hands and support local journalism. The other thing, Blake, I wanted to just touch on is, for those of us in the local Athens community, the trajectory of the Banner Herald has been a really strange one to watch, because I know when I was cutting my teeth as a young community organizer and hip hop artist, I would visit the Banner Herald building and it felt like visiting the Daily Planet or something. Like I'd have to go drop something off with Julie, and it, you really would feel like you had walked into a big bullpen or something. And you were there as some of those things transitioned. If somebody's watching this interview a couple decades from now and they're trying to understand what that journalism transition was like, I know it might be painful to talk about, but could you share a little bit of your perspective on that experience?
Well, it was hard because, well, and that's just so folks know, that's actually where you and I met, when you were working on the Bobby Saxon campaign back in 2008.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so I was covering that campaign. I was the political reporter at the Banner Herald.
Right.
And, I felt the same way you did when I walked in there for the first time. I was like, wow, this is a real paper. It was a nice building. We had like 30, 35 people in the newsroom. It was like, I felt like I made it, Yeah. And then, just over the years, really, the recession hit. The Great Recession, 2000, I guess it started in 2007, but it really got bad in 08, 09. And, it was just a round of layoffs and another round of layoffs. And all of a sudden you look around and, you see all these empty chairs and empty desks. I was in a cubicle area with like 3 other people, and all of a sudden, like I had it all to myself,
Yeah.
when there was nobody around me. Just watching it shrink and people leave and not be replaced, and then of course, more and more work kind of gets added onto your plate. Um, it just kind of got exhausting, and there was no end in sight. And we were trying to transition into digital, which I mean, I think we did a great job of editorially. As I mentioned earlier, the advertising dollars never really materialized. I mean, those online dollars are not replacing what anyone was losing in print, and so it just continued to shrink and shrink. And the Morrises have made some really bad investments.
Mm.
They've taken on a lot of debt to buy several properties in the late '90s, and then couldn't pay it back. They went into bankruptcy, so that didn't help either. I mean, a lot of this was really self-inflicted.
Yeah.
But, and it's ongoing. I mean, this current recession that we're in, the coronavirus recession. I mean, you've seen newspapers and websites and magazines with massive layoffs in the past couple months, and it's just so disheartening to watch because I've just seen it happen over and over again. And it's like, when is it ever going to end? I mean, we've got to figure out something. I mean, I really do believe that people value journalism. We've just got to figure out a way to pay for it.
Well, and that's the key here is that, as someone who, as you mentioned, we first got to know each other when I was doing a political campaign. I've seen firsthand the importance of having local scrutiny on local politics. And without a strong local publication to provide that scrutiny, you have a different sort of politics. A good example of this is, we've reached an era, sadly, I remember when, jointly held debates held by the local publications was a rite of passage for local candidates, or this idea that you really had to be on your stuff. I mean, when I ran for office, I was told, if you don't start going to commission meetings, the press is going to question you and realize you don't know what you're talking about, and you're going to immediately be disqualified. And there was this kind of requirement that what's happening. And some of that seems to have faded as some local scrutiny has backed off. I know that many of us are thrilled that you're at Flagpole and still providing a good weekly viewpoint from there. But can you speak to a little bit more about why Athens should want local journalism, why it's important to a community to have local journalism for their own quality of life? Can you make that case at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, the easy answer is when there's scrutiny of City Hall, people are scared of us, and if they're scared of us, you're going to have a clean government. And I think Athens, does have a clean government. Kind of as a journalist, I wish there was some kind of corruption or something to investigate, but there's really not that much. And I think the reason for that, one of the reasons for that at least, is because we do have so many eyes on City Hall.
Right.
And Athens still, it may not be quite the level it used to be, but I think between Flagpole and the Banner Herald and the Red and Black, I think Athens is still well covered as a city. Studies have shown that cities that don't have newspapers, where the newspapers have gone out of business, their taxes go up.
Right.
There are all kinds of problems because nobody's keeping an eye on things.
Yeah, I was going to share that. I know that during my public administration studies, that was something that came up, that someone ran the numbers and realized it would be a better investment for local taxpayers to subscribe to the paper once a week than take the hit of losing their paper, because I think they said that, for SPLOST and other things where municipalities take out bonds, one of the things that determines their bond rating is whether or not there's a thriving local paper, because they feel like that's one of the factors on whether the government might misspend that money. So I see we have some comments here. Dan Delamater jumped in to say, now more than ever, we need reputable and trusted journalism. You're a good news person and we appreciate you. Milton Leathers jumped in to say the news building might as well have been the Daily Planet. So as confirmed by Milton Leathers. I want to jump into Dan's comment here. So Blake, it's one thing if as a journalist you are covering another country or you're covering nationwide sports. But for you to cover small town politics, Dan's making this comment about, we appreciate you. And I know that that's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing to be a local news person and be appreciated because you often have to write things that other people don't like, or some folks feel like aren't fair. Or, I'm sure that within seconds of you publishing something, your inbox is immediately full with people wanting retractions. Um, how have you worked to navigate that ability to have a life in the town you live in with your family, but then also have this responsibility to write about it critically? How do you juggle those things?
It's not easy, to tell you the truth, especially having lived here so long and having formed so many relationships with so many people in so many different parts of the community who don't always see eye to eye with each other, or with me sometimes. And it really is a small town. I mean, Athens is a small town, but it has a lot of big city problems. Poverty rate, homelessness, uh, all of those things, affordable housing issues. I mean, I can go on and on, education. These are big city problems, but we have a small town politics. And a lot of times it does get very personal. And I wish it didn't. I wish we could focus more on policies and ideas, I guess, than personalities. But, if you're a journalist, you just kind of have to, I mean, I'll be honest, like I dread it sometimes. I'm like, oh man, like I got to write the story and I'm just going to get creamed for it, but I mean, you have to do it. You have to do it. It's your job and you have to do it and just take the hit, so it is what it is.
One thing I think that you've on this subject that I've seen you write about for years is the cycle. So you tend to every few years, right before we're going into an election season, for you to kind of steel yourself, where you'll make these comments about like, I don't know if I can take one more year of this or whatever, And so you have, I think of all the years you've been covering local politics, there are certain things in Athens that you see again and again. So if somebody, once again, for those folks that are tuning in today or might be tuning in someday, can you talk about some of the patterns and tropes of Athens you've grown accustomed to? I mean, what are some things that you come to expect year after year?
Well, things kind of go in cycles, and I've been here long enough to where I know that, every 5 years or so, like the same things are going to come up again and again. Things like what to do about the homeless. Like about every 5 years, downtown business owners get fed up and they say, we've got to do something about all these homeless people downtown. And then, committees are formed and like, everything goes through the process, and then they realize, oh yeah, well, we really can't stop people from panhandling because of the First Amendment. Which, duh, I mean, but so it's the same conclusion, but you just have to kind of keep going through the process. One thing, protests at the Arch. Anytime anything happens in the national news, there's going to be a protest at the Arch. Mm-hmm. And they've always been peaceful. They vary in size. I've seen some with 20 people. I've seen some with 200 people. I've seen some with 2,000 people. But that all changed Sunday, actually.
I did have to share real quick before we get into Sunday.
Yeah,
which is, I just had to share. We had a flurry of comments. to those of you that just commented, I will try to include your comments as it kind of organically fits into our conversation. So Michael, Milton, please don't feel like I'm ignoring you. I'll get to you in just one second. But yes, Tim had the most timely comment, which is, I don't know if I can take one more year. Blake Aued telling me he can't take one more year of this. So that's a good.
I'm like Roger Murtaugh. I'm getting too old for this shit.
That's right. So Yeah, you just need like a young hip reporter that's a maverick or
Yeah,
something.
I need a Mel Gibson to kind of like
Yeah.
throw himself into the fray.
So I think you were about to get to my next question, which is if there are certain cycles and things you expect. I was going to ask when the last time something happened that surprised you. And I know right before we went on air, we talked about how Sunday was a bit of a surprise in certain ways. Do you want to talk a little bit about Sunday through your lens, what you saw and what you're thinking about?
Sure, yeah, and I actually wasn't there. I was kind of, monitoring everything from afar. I'm actually out of town right now, but um, watching, and this is one of the things that I was kind of dissing social media earlier, but this is one of the things it's kind of great for is, I could sort of keep track of everything and see everybody's posts and videos and live streams and all that, and I was a little nervous. I almost thought about like coming back because I was like, oh, what if it goes down? What if it really goes down? Because I saw a lot of people posting about like tear gas and what to do if things get violent, and I'm like, this feels a little weird.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I talked myself out of it. I was like, you know what, it's gonna be fine. It's always fine. Nothing ever happens. Like people are gonna wave signs and chant, and then they're gonna go home. It'll be okay. And for hours, that's what it was. That's what happened. And then, then these like Boogaloo boys show up with rifles, and people start graffitiing the Confederate monument, and then all of a sudden, the National Guard and the cops are like rolling down Broad Street with tear gas. Um, it's just kind of crazy. I've never seen anything like that happen here.
Right.
We didn't. But even then, it was still not nearly as bad as what's been going on in other cities. I mean, nobody set any cop cars on fire. Nobody broke any windows. So I guess we kind of got off light, but it was just really surprising to see. And we're still all trying to sort of piece together exactly what happened. Apparently the police chief asked the manager for a emergency declaration, and they declared a curfew, and sent drones out to tell people to go home. And then there was maybe 100 200 people supposedly who didn't want to go home, who just kind of sat down in the street, and then the cops rolled up on them with tear gas, which a lot of people are upset about. That's not typical. I've covered a lot of protests, and I've never seen one turn violent, and I've never seen the local police do anything except maintain a respectful distance and just keep an eye on things. And they've really always been there as much to protect the protesters as to, be there in case the protesters try to, do anything.
Like,
So,
one question I want to
uh,
ask is, if you had been in town, it's hard for me to imagine you not being there. You like Josh. Yeah,
no, I would have
yeah,
been there
yeah. So I
absolutely.
mean, you're one of these people like Josh, and increasingly, as you mentioned, has some of these young red and black reporters are really tenacious too. But you're just one of these people that I kind of see ubiquitously at all of these events. It was shocking to see that some of the journalists incidentally got gassed as part of this. Do you have any thoughts on that? Should there have been any special warnings for the media to back off, or is that not typical? That's one thing that I'm not putting any blame there. I don't actually know how that works. Uh,
Yeah.
Is it typical for journalists to be so close that they would, uh, come under that kind of fire?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if you're any good at your job, yeah, definitely. And our photographer, Whitley Carpenter, got gassed.
Oh wow.
He's okay, but
Well, that's good to
he
hear.
did get gassed. And sometimes you'll see the police set up sort of like a pinned in media area. I don't really like that.
Hmm.
It makes it really hard to cover things because you can't actually move around and talk to people. So I would rather just be in the crowd. When you're a journalist, I mean, that's just a risk that you always know that's a possibility. Um, it's a risk that you take, and you try to be as close to the action as you can. And in other cities, there have actually been journalists who've been shot with rubber bullets.
Right.
And one
One off
actually,
an eye, right? Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, that's just part of the job. I mean, when you're a journalist, you are a member of the public. We don't have any special privileges or abilities or powers. We're just ordinary citizens who, journalism is our job, but it's not like we're not protected in any way, and we don't and can't do anything that anybody else couldn't do. We're
Right.
just members of the public who happen to be journalists. So we don't get, or I think deserve, any kind of special protection.
Blake, we try to remain responsive to comments that we get in the Facebook page. And so I'm just going to show a few. Some of these, you can just spend about 30 to 60 seconds on each one. Some of these aren't necessarily aligned with the conversation we're having today, which if you have questions, especially if they're about COVID, please share them. But nonetheless, I just want to bring them up just to get your take on them, because I know you have an eagle-eyed view of Athens. So I'll start with Milton's real quick. Milton shared, Blake, how much longer do you expect the brick and tan era of architecture to continue in Athens?
Forever.
Forever and ever? Okay, Blake is predicting forever, so that's what we're going to hold.
No, I have no idea, but I mean, that seems to be the style that everyone has settled on. I'm not a big fan personally. I think it's boring, and I'd like to see a little more diversity, but I don't expect that to happen. And I think that's a national trend where, if cities have really gotten serious about their codes, but so many of them have these kind of off-the-shelf solutions, and Athens is one of them. Where our downtown code was designed by an internationally known architect. So there's a lot of one-size-fits-all, and developers have kind of solved that matrix where they figured out a type of design that really could pass muster almost anywhere, and so it's sort of plug and play for them. And until we actually get a design guidelines that are unique to Athens, I don't think we're going to see anything different.
Thanks for sharing. Michael Smith responded when we were talking about earlier about journalism keeping in close scrutiny. I think this is meant to be read sarcastically. I think the jail is a perfect example of our clean government. Also, the $34 million Classic Center is just a textbook example of how uncompromised metropolitan governments work to the good, thank God. So Michael is a comment. Let me share this as a question. So do you think that there are common blind spots or areas in local journalism that need more scrutiny in the Athens area?
Well, I mean, as far as the jail and the Classic Center goes, those were SPLOST projects. They were approved by the voters, and there was a ton of coverage, lots of information that was given to the voters, and they overwhelmingly approved those projects.
Okay.
So, that's all I can really say about that. I don't think it was a lot of scrutiny.
Corey Loomis shared, and by the way, I have two more comments I'm going to share, and then we'll dive into COVID here. Corey Loomis shared, do you think that sprawl will force local businesses from downtown? And do you think that there's another location for them to move? Any thoughts? Oh, by the way, Michael did share not Lake Fall. So okay. Thanks, Michael. So yeah, to Corey's question.
Well, I think there's a lot of challenges for downtown businesses. I don't know if sprawl is one. There's a little bit of friction because we actually don't have a lot of sprawl in Athens. We do have sprawl in other counties around us, but we've focused a lot of our development in Athens in the downtown area, and a lot of people don't like that because they don't like the student housing complexes, and but they are a reality. So, but I think one of the side effects of that is that the rents are going up quite a bit downtown. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult if you're a locally owned business to afford the rent downtown.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about that, but I do think that we are seeing, and we'll probably continue to see, non-chain, non-student oriented businesses move to other nodes, probably outside the downtown area. I mean, you see what's happening in 5 Points in Normaltown. I think there's some potential for other areas like the Hawthorne area, Baxter Street, West Broad, redeveloping the mall, probably some nodes in the Gaines School Lexington Road area where, I think more kind of like grown-up oriented, locally owned businesses would be able to thrive. Newton Bridge, where there's a lot of redevelopment going on in the industrial areas. So, that's a change. But one of the things about downtown is downtown has changed before and it will change again.
So that's a perfect segue into the last comment I'm going to throw up before we get to COVID. Probably tied to what happened on Sunday, because we're seeing this happen around the country now, is in the aftermath of these protests. Again, we're seeing discussions about the role and visibility of Confederate memorials and monuments. I know as Historic Athens, we're getting a lot of questions and comments on this. Some of the discussion is, since we are not permitted as a community to destroy or demolish monuments of this type, there's been a lot of talk about relocation. So Milton asking here, have you realized an ideal new spot for the monument to the Confederate dead? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it belongs in a landfill, personally, but not only can we not destroy it, we can't move it either. So unfortunately, with the state law being what it is, I think we're kind of stuck. Now if the local government decided they were going to do it anyway and thumb their nose at the state and say, what you going to do about it? I think a lot of people would welcome that, but I don't know.
Yeah, so that's one topic that I'm looking forward to getting into with some of our elected officials as this series goes on is, and for those of you that aren't familiar with this concept, I think if you go back to the Russell Edwards episode, it came up a lot, but state preemption, there are a lot of, I think one thing that's commonly misunderstood in the public is how many areas the state assumes control in ways that the local government can't actually make decisions.
And Lyra Rose just pointed out that it's been moved twice, and that's true, but that predates the law that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Lyra. So, all right. So when we first asked you on, before we realized that we would see the surge of public sentiment against police violence, and in support of Black Lives Matter, before we knew that we'd be talking about those things today, we set up this conversation to talk about COVID-19. I'm really glad we've had the conversation we've had so far, but let's talk about COVID-19. Can you talk about, let's zoom out first just to say, when did this first start affecting your work? When did this really come onto the scene in a way that it changed your day-to-day life?
March 12th.
Very precise, very precise.
Yeah. Well, it'd been in the news a lot. It hadn't touched Athens. It hadn't touched Georgia really yet. But, we've been working. We knew it was coming. And so we've been working on a story about coronavirus that was going to run in the paper the following week. And I believe that Thursday morning, our reporter had checked with UGA, and they'd insisted that they were not going to close. And then that afternoon, they did a total 180 and said, yes, we are going to close. So we had to scrap the story and really start all over again. But, once that domino fell, it was just one after another. I mean, everything started closing. The school district closed, the public schools closed, then came about a week later, then came the local shelter in place ordinance that shut down most businesses, which the state later came along and did their own shelter in place. So really within the span of a week, it went from, oh, here's this thing that, this is a little bit worrisome, to, wow, the whole world just changed.
Right.
I've never really seen anything move that fast. It was crazy. It was a lot to keep up with. And we saw it in our own business as well. I mean, I remember coming in the next day and, the phone's ringing off the hook. Advertisers are trying to pull their ads. And, we went from, I think the next week, our advertising dropped by about 80% because all our advertisers are closed.
Wow.
So, we depend a lot on like bars and restaurants as far as advertisers, and they're all shut down. Then we realized we have nowhere we're going to put our papers. All our racks are in these bars and restaurants that are shut down. And, we don't even know if we're going to be able to put a paper out. And we finally did. The papers have been really small. They've been, half or 2/3 of the size that they usually are. But we have been putting them out. So,
Yeah,
but it was touch and go there for a couple weeks.
it's it's difficult. A lot of times we ask people to think about the questions they're answering through the lens of the future, since there is a good chance that future generations could look at this. Uh, but it's difficult to articulate for me what flagpole means to Athens. I mean, so uh, it has such a unique relationship, and a relationship. I used to be able to make comparisons to like Atlanta and creative loafing or things like that, but it's outlasted that, and it's also become more distinct over time. It has a very specific relationship to our city. If somebody here somehow has never picked up a flagpole, maybe they've walked by one, but they just didn't know if it was for them or not. Can you just take a quick second, as we're talking about COVID, to talk about what flagpole is? Can you just delve into that for just a second?
Well, it says it right on our cover. We're the color bearer of Athens, Georgia. One of the things that makes Flagpole special is the fact that it's locally owned. The owners live in the community and have for a very long time. Most of the staff has been there for quite a while, and we all live in the community.
Mm-hmm.
We're your neighbors. You see us at the grocery store. You see us out walking the dog. I mean, we're the people involved, not just the publication, are really part of the fabric of the community, and I think that's a really special thing.
Yeah.
So, we're a cheerleader for everything that makes Athens unique, but like any friend would do, we also hold a mirror up and tell the city when things are going wrong.
So that mirror is critically important. And, it's also interesting because Athens is a very civics and politics oriented community and a very music oriented community. And so you have both parts of that publication. How do you recalibrate something like that for COVID times? I mean, so what has Flagpole done to survive and recalibrate during this era?
Well, we did get one of the PPP grants, which really was instrumental, I think, to our survival. The advertising department has really gotten creative. I want to give them a lot of credit. They've done some promotions with restaurants to allow them to sort of get the word out that they're open for takeout, things of that nature. We've stepped up our donation campaigns. And the revenue is slowly coming back. It's still not close to where it was 2 or 3 months ago, but it is getting a little bit better. So hopefully, when we come out of this, we have a symbiotic relationship with not only our readers and our advertisers.
Yeah.
That has remained strong, and so I hope that we're able to help local businesses come out of this stronger, and that they're able to help us come out of this stronger as well.
Absolutely. We have about 10 more minutes with Blake. I'm just going to very briefly mention that there are some comments in the comment section we might not get time to, although still keep sharing your thoughts, folks. I do know that in the discussion about the Confederate Memorial, we saw a slew of comments come in there. Lyra sharing its original location. Deborah pointing out, which is why it's important, who we elected the state level. Milton expressing his confidence we could move it. One concept that's popped up increasingly is interpretation or alternate things present at the site. So Diana shared the idea of a new plaque that could tell the story or the rest of the story. Lyra Rhodes sharing a large red poppy. We'd love to do an episode at some point and talk about Athens' relationship to the poppy symbol. It's under reported, or under, not enough people know it, but just talking about a poppy memorial there. So thank you, Lyra, for sharing that. Also, when I mentioned the creative loafing thing, Lyra shared that as a former editor of Creative Loafing, the 80s Flagpole is much more connected to the community. We know the people who advertise, we know the writers and editors. It's very different. And Dan also shared, and this is something I do want to ask you about. Dan shared, thank you for the issue that highlighted graduating seniors. I hope that added some meaningful revenue while allowing parents to celebrate our seniors. So that's right. Flagpole also did a thing where you could celebrate graduation at a time where, unfortunately, for our graduating seniors, they weren't able to come together in the way that I know I did and others did So that was an important innovation. What was that like, seeing that behind the scenes?
Well, I wasn't super involved in that because that was sort of an advertising function, but it was a friend of mine's idea. Actually, as a teacher, had this idea, and we thought it was a great idea, and it did make us a little bit extra money, which is nice. But you're right. I mean, I think it didn't mean a lot to the community, or I hope it did, because this is such a strange time, and to not be able to go through these rituals. Um, I mean, it hurt a lot of kids and it hurt a lot of parents, I think.
Yeah.
So for them to get some kind of recognition instead of going across that stage, I hope was a good thing.
Yeah, I imagine it was. Let's transition into. I have one more kind of big question, and then there's three questions I ask each of our guests in the series. So the last kind of question outside of that is this. So we've talked about your relationship with Athens. We've talked about how you have the specific viewpoint on Athens, that there's certain patterns you're used to. You kind of intimately know how Athens works as much as any one person can. Um, so what has been your perspective on, I mean, what's it been like watching Athens grapple with this, with COVID specifically, over the last several weeks?
Well, it's been frightening, for one thing. I mean, I'm as worried about this virus as anybody else. And I don't think people are taking it as seriously now as they were when this first started, and that concerns me because I don't think we're anywhere close to out of the woods yet.
Hmm.
But early on, it was really impressive, and it just reminded me again of why I really love this city, because uh, you saw the local government, spring in action, and you saw, businesses didn't complain about closing. They wanted to close because they wanted to protect their employees and protect their customers, and they did this gladly. And people sprung into action with resources to help the people who had lost their jobs and who were suffering from physical and mental health issues. So it was just all the typical things that Athens always does anytime there's a crisis, because we have so many
Yeah.
civic-minded, compassionate people who live here, and that's really what makes this place great.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to break my rule just because it seems relevant here. Dan shared something that I think is timely. So he said, interesting note about COVID, even if not for comment here, not discussion with Blake, but Dan, we'll bring it up here. So today would have been the 172nd, yeah, annual meeting of the Southern Mutual Insurance Company policyholders. I believe it's the first annual meeting that has been forced to reschedule since the 1860s. COVID has evidently accomplished something that either world wars, the 1918 pandemic, or other major national and global events could do. We're seeing, Dan, I'm sorry to hear that. Last night would have been our 51st annual preservation awards at the Morton Theater. We've converted it virtually, and we're going to be sharing more information about that. I know we've seen cancellations of really important local traditions, some more new, like Athfest. And then nationally, we've seen things canceled that survived every world event that Dan is describing. I saw that the Boston Marathon has been canceled for the first time in 124 years. Blake, uh, as a journalist, what is it like to see, I don't know, history unfolding around you at such an epic scale, and so many things being canceled and the world changing so much? Is it disconcerting? Does your position as journalist give you more agency in it? How does it change how you see all this?
Um, that's not really something we think about. I mean, I'm just now, really in the past couple weeks, having a little bit of breathing room to really kind of step back and think about those kinds of things. But when you're in the moment, you're just busy.
Right,
You're just doing it.
right.
I mean, you're really living in the moment. You're on the phone, you're emailing, texting. I mean, you're just too busy to really like take a step back. Um, and usually that phase only lasts for a couple days, but I mean, that went on for like weeks and weeks and weeks,
Sure.
which is one thing after another. I mean, it was like one long month-long breaking news story,
Right.
which is, I've never seen anything like it. Things were just happening so fast for such an extended period of time. Um, but what was I going to say?
Well, but you
Anyway,
see, you're talking about how every day was a breaking news story, and I do think that we've seen that, we still see that, and it almost creates this sense of fatigue where, I mean, not almost, it does create a sense of fatigue,
yeah.
of news fatigue. Do you think one of the reasons why folks are kind of returning to a sense of normalcy, as you were describing, maybe not taking the precautions that they were taking before, is some of that just that fatigue of trying to keep up with all of this?
I think it might be, and especially because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of disinformation out there. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, and it's turned into almost a partisan issue.
Mm,
Um, Unfortunately, just like everything else in our society, where there are competing sets of facts. Well, facts, but
right.
um, which I think is really unfortunate and really to the detriment of a lot of people's health, and has probably resulted in many deaths.
Yeah.
Because people don't, a lot of people don't, believe any sort of authority, and don't believe anything that's said in the media or said by experts. Um, so, what was
Well,
the question again?
no, no, listen, this is,
I forgot what
I
I'm
think
about
we,
to
I
say.
think we experienced, I think I watched that fatigue wash over you just now. So, uh,
Fatigue, yeah,
yeah, yeah. So,
yeah.
so
Well, there's that, and I just think it's the fact that it's summertime and it's really nice out, and people have been cooped up in their house for 2 months, and they're just sort of done with it.
sure. So, speaking of that, that's a great transition into our last three questions here, because my first question is a hypothetical one. It assumes a world where we were done with it. So, fortunately for all of us, a lot of the best businesses in Athens, not all of them have been able to do this, but we've seen so much innovation on curbside. There's still a lot of my favorite dishes in Athens I can go out and get, or craft beer, or this or that. Still lots of ways to support small businesses. But the kind of life we had a year ago where we could go to our favorite bars or favorite restaurants, that's just not happening right now. So the first question, Blake, is this: if you woke up tomorrow and somehow this was all over, you were in Athens, you had the day off, shelter in place wasn't necessary anymore, and all of your favorite places were open, where would you go? How would you spend that day?
Uh, do I have someone to watch my daughter?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. If we can fix a
I'd
pandemic, we
probably,
can fix the childcare issue. Yeah,
okay. I'd probably go to Normal Bar or Hilo for happy hour, and then head downtown for a show at the 40 Watt or Flickr or Little Kings or Caledonia.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hard to beat that. Hard to beat
Which is
that.
not something I do very often. Haven't for a long time, having a young child, but that would probably be my definition of an ideal evening
Absolutely.
in Athens.
So then, Blake, second question is this: when we come out of this pandemic, it's likely we'll also be hopefully coming out of a recession. In the historic preservation community, one of the areas of concern right now is that when you do come out of a recession, sometimes uh, you get not only responsible, positive development, but sometimes you can get unrestrained, unrestricted, and reckless commercial development, which can endanger historic places. So with that in mind, we've just been asking each of our guests to name some of their favorite historic places in Athens, places that they hope, generations from now, folks watching this could still go out and enjoy. Do you have any places like that in Athens that come to mind?
Um, I can't really think of one in particular. I mean, there's a lot of great architecture and buildings that I like, but I don't know if I have a favorite.
Mm,
Um, I mean, that's part of the appeal of the town, I think, is just its historic nature in general. Um, one thing I will say though is, you're absolutely right, and I remember when we came out of the recession, the last one, around 2011, 2012, we did see just this explosion of pent up development. I don't know if that's going to happen this time, because hopefully this recession will be short, and we
right.
really haven't seen. And the banks are okay. The banks are okay this time, so they're loaning money, and we haven't really seen a slowdown in construction. I mean, I think there's a lot of confidence on kind of a macro level that this is not going to last nearly as long as it did last time, and that there's a lot more liquidity in the economy, and like our office is right next door to the St. Joe redevelopment,
Right.
and that hasn't stopped.
Still going, yeah.
That's still going. So yeah, I don't. Hopefully, it won't be that kind of explosion like we saw.
Yeah, pen up is a good word. I'll use that in future interviews when I'm phrasing that question. Thank you. So Blake, I know that we don't want to take up too much of your time. For people that are viewing this now, some of them like to head over to the Athens Welcome Center page after this to catch their live cast. It tends to start at 2. So I'll just kind of close this out with one last open-ended question, which is, I know we've talked a lot about your perspective on Athens, your relationship in Athens, so many different angles on this. But if you were speaking directly to a future Blake Aued, someone 100 years from now, they're doing a retrospective on this moment in Athens history, and they're digging through the archives, and they come across this interview, what would you want to say to that person? What would you want them to know about this moment in Athens history?
I don't know. It was a crazy time. I don't know. Sorry. I don't have a good answer to that.
Hopefully they're still employed at Flag.
I'll think of something after I get off, but right now I'm just drawing a blank.
Sure. Anything in particular? Well, and I know that in some ways this question is redundant than the one I led into with the 3 final ones, which was kind of, what are you seeing out there in Athens? I'll swap it out then. Here's the swap.
Okay, I thought of something.
Okay, sure. Go for
it. I think this has illustrated that leadership matters.
Okay.
And I think if you look at the way that the city responded to this crisis and the way that the state responded to it and the way that the federal government responded to it, it becomes so clear that, like Deborah Gonzalez said, who we elect matters, and leadership is important. And if you have good leadership, you can get through it. If you have bad leadership, it's just going to exacerbate all of the problems.
Well said. No need for a swap. Let's go out on that note. So, Blake, I want to thank you so much. I am going to flash one last time on the screen, if I can find it, this link, which is in our comment section, but you can go to flagpole.com and submit a donation. Also, if you're watching this and you're a local entrepreneur, business owner, and you are someone who's able and willing to, we encourage you to advertise with Flagpole. I know that Historic Athens does, at different periodic points throughout the year, and we can't imagine life without Flagpole. So please support it if you're watching. We hope that you join us again tomorrow at 1 o'clock for our interview with Jessica Rothacker from Heirloom Cafe. We love Heirloom, and we look forward to that discussion. Chris Herron from Creature Comforts the next day, and then Commissioner Jerry Neesmith on Friday. Blake, thank you so much for taking some time to be with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Tommy.
Absolutely. Please stay with me 1 second. You and I are going to go offline. To everyone else, please be safe out there. Take proper precautions. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thanks a lot. Bye.